The steward's finger pointed straight at her, and the whole kitchen went silent as stone. Elin felt every eye turn toward her at once. Her face went hot. Someone near the fire let out a short, ugly laugh. "West Kitchen," the steward said again, flat and cold like he was reading a grocery list. "Starting tonight." An older cook named Bess covered her mouth, but her eyes were laughing above her hand. A boy by the woodpile whispered to another boy, and they both smirked without hiding it. Everyone knew what the West Kitchen meant. Old Marta had died in there, alone, locked in by snow for 3 long days. Nobody had lit that hearth since. Elin did not cry. She did not beg. Instead, she did something nobody expected. She curtsied. A slow, proper curtsy, the kind you give a lord, not a punishment. Then she reached calmly for a candle stub off the shelf, struck it against the flint without asking permission, and walked straight toward the back door, the one nobody used, the one that led toward the dark, dead wing of the house. The room went dead silent. Even the laughing boy stopped. "She's mad," someone muttered. Bess called after her, half worried, half mocking. "Girl, you don't even know if the chimney still draws." Elin didn't turn around. "Then I'll learn," she said, plain and steady, like she was talking about the weather. She pushed open the heavy door. Cold air rushed out to meet her, smelling of dust and old smoke. Snow was already falling outside, fat white flakes catching the last gray light of evening. Behind her, the warm kitchen buzzed with whispers, some cruel, some pitying, none kind. Elin didn't listen. She stepped into the dark hallway alone, candle trembling in her hand, and walked toward whatever waited for her in that forgotten room. The pot slipped from Elin's raw, wet hands and hit the stone floor with a crash that echoed through the empty kitchen. She stared at it, then at her fingers, cracked and bleeding from days of scrubbing rust. Something inside her broke too. She sank down against the cold hearth and cried. Not soft tears. Loud, ugly sobbing that bounced off the dark stone walls and came back to her, mocking her. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't do this alone." Her hand pressed flat against the stone beside the dead fireplace, and that's when she felt it. Not smooth stone, but scratched marks, uneven under her fingers. She wiped her eyes and leaned closer with her candle. Words carved deep, old and worn. "A cook who gives up first starves everyone last." Elin went still. Marta had written this. Years ago, alone in this same spot, maybe crying these same tears. Something shifted in her chest. She stood up, wiped her face on her sleeve, and blew out a breath. The next morning, she found old Tobin the shepherd mending a fence, his hands slow with age. "Did you know Cook Marta?" she asked. Tobin's eyes went soft and far away. "Best cook this estate ever had. Wasted nothing. Fish heads, turnip peels, stale bread hard as rock. She turned it all into something a body could eat and be glad for." Elin listened like her life depended on it, because it did. She went back and roasted old bones until the kitchen filled with a rich, dark smell. She mixed ground acorns into flour to stretch it further. She strung apple slices above the fire to dry and packed cabbages tight into barrels of salty brine. Day by day, the black, cold hearth turned warm and orange. Smoke curled properly up the chimney now, instead of choking the room. The smell of real bread drifted out across the frozen courtyard. People who once laughed began walking slower past the west kitchen door, sniffing the air, wondering. Elin didn't notice them watching. She was too busy working, too busy remembering Marta's words, carved deep enough to outlast death itself. The steward burst through the kitchen door without knocking, snow still clinging to his boots, his face pale as the frost outside. "It's gone," he said, voice cracking. "The main store's, nearly all of it, gone." Elin set down her ladle slowly. Outside, wind screamed against the shutters. Snow had piled higher than the fence posts for 3 days straight. Wolves had been heard near the barn the night before, howling close enough to wake the children. "How long until the road's clear?" she asked. The steward's hands shook. "Weeks, maybe longer. Lord Ashcombe is Snowdon himself, can't get back. He looked at her then, this man who had once pointed at her like she was nothing, who had sent her to die in a cursed kitchen for a joke. Now his eyes were desperate. Can you feed everyone, all of them? The kitchen went quiet. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Elin walked to her shelves. Barrels of brined cabbage, strings of dried apple, smoked meat hanging dark from the beams. Sacks of flour stretched thin with acorns and peas. Not much, but not nothing. "I can try," she said. Then her voice hardened, sharp as winter itself. "But everyone eats the same. No lord's portion bigger than a stable boy's. We ration together or we starve together." The steward, pride swallowed whole, only nodded. For 6 weeks Elin barely slept. Broth simmered always on the fire day and night. She counted every crumb of bread like it was gold. When a stable boy shook with fever one night, she mixed onion and honey into a tonic, praying Tobin's old remedy would work. It did. One terrible morning, she opened the flour sack and found barely enough left for a week. Her heart pounded. She lay awake that whole night, wondering if she had counted wrong, if this was the morning everyone finally went hungry. But dawn came. She made the porridge thinner than ever before and ladled it into every waiting bowl. Nobody starved that day. And slowly, the fearful eyes watching her began to soften into something Elin had never once seen aimed at her before. Respect. Lord Ashcombe's boots crunched through the last of the melting snow as he strode toward his own front doors, home at last. He expected weak workers, empty stores, maybe even graves. Instead, he found his people thin but standing, tired but alive. "Who kept you fed?" he asked the first stable boy he saw. "The cook, my lord, west kitchen, Elin." He asked a maid next. Same answer. He asked the steward himself, the man who once thought sending Elin there was a cruel joke. The steward's face went red with shame. "Elin, my lord," he said quietly, "she saved us all." Lord Ashcombe walked toward the old kitchen alone, the one shut for 11 years, the one his own family had chosen to forget. He pushed open the door, half expecting dust and silence. Instead, warm air rushed out to meet him. Herbs hung drying from every beam. The hearth glowed steady and orange, crackling softly. And there, scrubbing a pot with the same careful hands that had fed an entire estate through the worst winter in memory, stood Elin. She looked up, startled, then quickly wiped her hands and curtsied. "They told me," Lord Ashcombe said slowly, looking around the room in wonder, "that no cook could survive in here, that it was cursed." Elin shook her head. "Not cursed, my lord, only forgotten." She paused. "Forgotten things just need someone willing to remember them." Lord Ashcombe said nothing for a long moment. Then he did something no one expected. He bowed his head to her slightly, the way a lord rarely bows to a cook. Word of what happened spread through the whole county that spring, not through announcements, but through quiet whispers between neighbors, the way old folktales are born. They said a young woman walked into a cursed, forgotten kitchen with nothing but a candle and walked out having saved an entire estate. Lord Ashcombe gave Elin the title of head cook that same day, a title no one had held since Marta herself. And every winter after, when snow grew deep and roads grew dangerous, people remembered the year the West Kitchen, once cursed by rumor, was saved by one cook's stubborn, unbreakable heart.